Israel is waging a deliberate war of extermination. That's according to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, who himself, it should be said, perpetrated war crimes against the Palestinian people. It's in a devastating piece written for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and in practice constitutes a confession to genocide. Let's go through what he's written and why this is so important. Now, Olmert says this: the Israeli government is waging a pointless war without a clear goal or plan and without any chance of success. Since its establishment, the state of Israel has never initiated such a war. In this too, the gang of criminals headed by Benjamin Netanyahu has set a precedent that is unparalleled in the history of the state. Now, I should just quickly note, other than the revisionism there, the airbrushing of Israeli war crimes throughout its entire history, I should quickly note that Olmert was a member of Netanyahu's Likud party for over 3 decades. From 1973, the year it was founded, until 2006. He then went off to join Kadima, which was presented as a so-called moderate party, despite being led by Ariel Sharon, a right-wing war criminal. He goes on to say this: what is happening in the Gaza Strip in recent weeks has nothing to do with the goal of a legitimate war. Our fighters are being sent by the state leadership and the army leadership that obeys it to rampage in the neighbourhoods of Gaza City, Jabalia and Khan Yunis in an illegitimate military campaign. This is now a political private war, and its immediate result is turning the Gaza Strip into a humanitarian disaster zone. He goes on to say that he has, until this point, rebutted accusations made against the IDF and the Israeli state in terms of conduct in Gaza, including accusations of genocide and war crimes. Indeed, he says he put himself forward for interviews for Western media outlets, saying, "More than once in interviews, I disappointed those who invited me when I firmly claimed that Israel was not committing war crimes in Gaza. Excessive killings? Yes, an unimaginable number of uninvolved victims, including children, women and the elderly, did occur, but I argued firmly and with self-convincing conviction, in no case was an order given by a decision maker at the political level to harm civilians in Gaza without distinction. The large number of uninvolved civilians killed in Gaza was unreasonable, unjustifiable, unacceptable, but all of them, I said on every media channel in the world, were the result of a brutal war." Olmert there is saying that he used his position and authority to push back at those of us who have been saying very clearly and obviously since the genocide began that Israel was committing and is committing heinous war crimes on a daily basis. That's because of the overwhelming evidence and indeed the publicly repeated statements of genocidal and criminal intent by Israeli leaders. Olmert engaged in atrocity denial in the face of all the facts and should be made to account for that. That doesn't mean what should be regarded as a confession of Israeli crimes and genocide isn't important given who he is. Now, he says this war should have ended as early 2024, and it continues without justification, without a defined goal, and without a political vision for the future of the Gaza Strip and the entire Middle East. He also says that he had argued that the Israeli army did not operate an order or directive or intention from a senior command echelon to harm civilians indiscriminately. Therefore, he says, as he understood at the time, no war crimes were committed. He goes on to say that he had denied the crimes committed by Israel, but in recent weeks, I have been unable to do so. What we are doing in Gaza is a war of extermination, indiscriminate, unrestrained, cruel, and criminal killing of civilians. We are doing this not because of an accidental loss of control in a certain sector, not because of a disproportionate outburst of fighters in some unit, but as a result of a policy dictated by the government knowingly, intentionally, viciously, maliciously, with recklessness. Yes, we are committing war crimes. So there it is, a war of extermination. That's what he says. Israel is perpetrating an indiscriminate, unrestrained, cruel and criminal killing of civilians. And he makes clear this is not happening because of some sort of breakdown in discipline, but because of an intentional, deliberate policy directed by Israel's rulers. This is a crucial admission because this former Israeli prime minister, who has knowledge, of course, of running the Israeli state machinery, of directing the army, has inside an understanding of Israeli politics. He's no fringe figure in Israeli society, but a politician who emerged from the Israeli right. He's telling the world that Israel is deliberately waging a war of extermination against civilians at the direction of the Israeli government. He goes on, first, the starvation of Gaza. On this issue, the position of senior government officials is open and clear. Yes, we are depriving the residents of Gaza of food, medicine, and minimal means of subsistence as part of a declared policy. Netanyahu is trying, as usual, to obscure the nature of the instructions he gives in order to evade his legal and criminal responsibility when the time comes. But some of his eunuchs say it openly and publicly and even proudly. Yes, we will starve Gaza because all the residents of Gaza are Hamas, and therefore there is no moral or operational limit to destroying them all, more than 2 million people. Israeli media channels, each for their own reasons, some of which are understandable, are trying to moderate the picture of what is happening in Gaza. But the picture seen in the world is much broader and above all shocking. It is impossible to be even-handed and indifferent to it. It is no longer possible to ignore and shake our heads as if the world's reaction to what is happening there is simply a widespread outbreak of anti-Semitism, because after all, everyone hates us and everyone is anti-Semite, everyone's anti-Semitic. So here the former Israeli Prime Minister makes clear that the Israeli state is deliberately starving Gaza, which is a grave war crime and indeed forms the central basis of the arrest warrants for war crimes and crimes against humanity against Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant. Although is suggesting that indeed Netanyahu may well face trial. He may well face justice for what he has done, that he's trying to, in some way, cover his own backside because of future legal proceedings. Though, I mean, the evidence is so overwhelming, what is the point, frankly? And as he notes, as the repeated statements by Israeli leaders and officials have made clear, they see no distinction at all between the civilian population of Gaza and Hamas, those they deem military targets. And when he says there is no moral or operational limit to destroying them all, more than 2 million people, he could not be clearer. That's genocide. The Genocide Convention states that genocide constitutes acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. He refers to the evidence for the shocking plight of Gaza that the world has access to, and also refers to the malicious and false use of anti-Semitism to shut down any scrutiny of Israel and its crimes. He goes on to note European leaders, he calls friends of Israel, breaking ranks to condemn its murderous behavior. He goes on to say, we continue to massacre Palestinian civilians in the West Bank as well. He says that the declaration by the head of the Samaria Regional Council, Yossi Dagan, that Palestinian villages should be annihilated is a declaration of genocide. He further makes the point that the pogroms taking place in the West Bank are not isolated incidents. He says when a Palestinian village is burned, and quite a few have already been burned, they will explain to us that the perpetrators are a small violent group that does not represent the residents of the territories. This is a lie. They are many. He says it's impossible to ignore the behaviour of certain units in the IDF, including what he describes as the elite units, where the best and most courageous fighters serve. He says there are too many cases of brutal shooting of civilians, of destruction of property and homes, even when this should not happen. He discusses the looting of property, thefts from homes, which in many cases, IDF soldiers have also taken pride in and published in personal posts. We are committing war crimes. And he's alluding there to IDF soldiers boasting of their war crimes. I mean, never has a crime been so confessed to and boasted about as it was actually happening. That's what we see all the time. IDF soldiers have posted online because they're high on their own hubris. They're high on their sense of nothing will ever happen to them. So they can flout their criminality, their genocidal mania. He notes too, of course, the pogroms in the West Bank, which must not be neglected, the murderous rampage taking place in the West Bank itself, which, as he notes, is not isolated incidents, but systemic. Now, on one level, it's frankly ridiculous that we have to engage in a debate about whether the Israeli army is waging a war of extermination against the Palestinian people and committing the most depraved imaginable war crimes. It's like arguing about whether the earth is flat or not, except it's about death on a unimaginable mass scale. But what's absolutely important right now is that we build an absolutely undeniable consensus that these war crimes and indeed genocide is taking place, both to stop the West facilitating this abomination, for example, through arms sales and diplomatic support, and to get accountability and justice for those who have facilitated this genocide, not just in Israel, but of course across the West. I would note that for saying the sorts of things this Israeli former Prime Minister has said, people have been threatened, deplatformed, silenced, sacked, arrested, and even faced with deportation. I would also note the minimal coverage in the Western media about this. It's ridiculous. I mean, the former Israeli Prime Minister has just gone out and said that Israel is committing genocide, a war of extermination, terrible war crimes. An Israeli Prime Minister who was in Benjamin Netanyahu's own party for over 3 decades. Why isn't that newsworthy? Why isn't that plastered everywhere? I think, to be honest, because it just show expose the catastrophic failure of coverage. It's not failure, as I know it's a mistake, because there's a systemic problem in the Western media in terms of how they've covered this, because it's so blindingly obvious what Israel is doing. And this would just emphasize to Western audiences how they've been deliberately misled by the Western media about what's taking place. And it also exposes, of course, Western leaders, because they have facilitated all of this. They armed and backed it all the way through, despite all the overwhelming evidence, which even the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert can see for himself. This itself exposes them criminally for what they've done. Now, we should note that where Olmert was Israeli Prime Minister, he committed war crimes in Gaza, specifically in the 2008-2009 onslaught. In fact, he even declared at the time, we've said that if there's rocket fire against the south of the country, there will be a severe and disproportionate Israeli response to the fire on the citizens of Israel and its security forces. Outright coming out and committing to a disproportionate response is itself a confession of war crimes. The point is that even this former Israeli Prime Minister has come out and said what is undeniable. And the cracks continue to emerge. The German state, which has a history of committing genocide, of course, the Holocaust, the industrialized extermination of the Jewish people, as well as Roma, others classed as undesirable. And of course, in Africa, with the Herero and Nama genocides, it's continued that theme, of course, by backing and facilitating Israel's genocide. Well, now its right-wing Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, a militantly pro-Israel politician, says he could frankly no longer understand the goal of what the Israeli army is doing in the Gaza Strip. To harm the civilian population in such a way, as has increasingly been the case in recent days, can no longer be justified by fight against Hamas terrorism. Once again, Captain Obvious there. And the way he makes it out as though this is a recent phenomenon. I mean, Israel is doing what it's done from the beginning. This isn't, I mean, they're trying to make it out like, well, this was one thing before. It's a military campaign. It's sort of gone off the boil. It's gone extreme. It's spun out of control recently. This has been a criminal genocidal onslaught from the beginning. And they're trying to pretend that isn't the case because it exposes them. But this does again underline how it is all falling apart. Now, Israel continues to commit the most obscene crimes imaginable in front of the whole world. This weekend, dozens of Palestinians were slaughtered when the Israeli military struck Fahmy al-Jaghari school in Gaza. Children were burned alive on camera. Palestinian children burned alive by the West. Let's be clear, that's what's happening here. The West is responsible for this. It is a Western crime. The whole world can see it. And if you think the West will escape the inevitable consequences, then naivety doesn't even cover it. Sowing, then the reaping. The mass butchery of innocent people, including children, has been a central feature of Israel's genocide. On Friday night, one of those children killed was 11-year-old Yakin Hamad, known as Gaza's youngest influencer. She offered practical tips on survival with smiling, happy videos in unbearable circumstances.
Ice cream. Today we are distributing to the students of Aisha and the children of Gaza.
Ice skating, ice skating, ice skating, ice skating.
The invention of war. Didn't they cut off our gas? Here we made gas and are putting wood here.
And we boil everything on it. Gaza, no to the impossible.
How was a crime so monumental, so obscene, so shameless ever possible? Future generations will debate this at length. Entire books, conferences, will be dedicated to this. Entire fields of study. So let those future generations know the evidence at the time, all the way through, was overwhelming. There was no excuse for not knowing from the very start what was happening. Don't indulge any future lies or current lies about people with power and influence not knowing what was really going on. They knew everything. This genocide happened because Western states consciously made it happen. They directed it in practice. And it all happened with the direct facilitation of the Western media. The reckoning must be severe. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments. Help us take on the pro-genocide media in practice, which is what it is. Let's just be honest, at patreon.com/OwenJones84. You make everything we do possible. We're reaching huge numbers, millions of people every month because of your support. Do share the video, listen to us on the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll speak to you in a bit.